Hi everybody, and welcome to this video series for CSSs. My name is Oyvind, and I'm a shopping specialist here on the CSS team in Dublin. We're doing these video series to answer the most commonly asked questions from you about Google Ads and Merchant Center. Today, we're kicking it off by looking at policies and feed maintenance. Now, firstly, we'll start by going through the basics for Merchant Center. This might be familiar to some of you, but we'll cover it as it's important to get it right. Merchant Center is the building blocks for all your shopping activity, so here we make sure that the foundation is in order. Secondly, we'll move on to how you can deal with disapprovals and account suspensions. There are quite a few policy requirements you need to comply with on Merchant Center, so we'll cover the most common issues and how to prevent them, or how to deal with them if they occur. Thirdly, we'll go through a bit of maintenance, how to keep your feed up to date, ensure that the most important information is kept fresh, and how to use Merchant Center tools to make sure you make the most of the information available in your feeds. First up, Merchant Center basics. Let's have a quick look at what this section will cover. Firstly, what are product feeds and what are they made of? And then, which attributes go into a shopping feed? Before we see when should feeds ideally be updated. Now, simply speaking, product feeds are structured pieces of data that contain your offers and provide all the product information Google uses to run shopping ads. In other words, your feed is what makes shopping ads work and help decide how well they work. The higher the quality of your feed, the better campaigns generally perform. Now that we've heard how important feeds are, let's have a look at what they're actually made of. It's really quite simple. It's just two things: feed attributes and feed values. Feed attributes are the headers that tell Merchant Center what the information in a given column is, and feed values is the information populated in those columns. Let's have a look at a real example. Here we see what a feed might look like. The attributes that we spoke about are item ID, title, description, etc., which Merchant Center uses to identify the type of information in each column. The values in each row is the information that comprises a given offer. So the item ID, description, link URL, etc. As you can see here, not every attribute needs to be populated for every item. In the right-hand side here, we see that the age group and gender specifications in this case are only applicable to a few products. Something that's very important to note for you as a CSS are the two attributes for the final URL shown in the link column and the AdWords redirect. For final URL, we require you to add the product URL leading directly to the product on your merchant's website. However, by adding a tracking URL in the AdWords redirect column, you will still be able to show the merchant that the traffic is provided by your CSS campaign. Now, this is vital, especially for CSSs who charge for clickouts. So to recap, you will have the merchant's catalog of products that you want to advertise. You then create the data feed, which contains all the information we saw in the last slide. You then upload the feed to Merchant Center for processing, and if everything looks good, the feed info will be passed on to Google Ads, where you have built shopping campaigns to be served in the form of a shopping ad. We'll go through shopping campaigns in more detail at a later stage. For now, let's focus on Merchant Center as the foundation for the next steps. Some of the attributes are obviously mandatory to have in the feed in order to make it all work. Now, it wouldn't be great to show a shopping ad without, for example, a title or where the product image was missing. So in the cases where these attributes are missing, the item will get disapproved. Broadly speaking, the core required attributes are a product ID, a title, a description of the product, a link to the merchant's product page, an image link which shows the product, the price, the availability, a GTIN, and the brand. In other words, the very basics that make up a shopping ad. But there are also some local requirements that differ from country to country. Color, for example, is a required attribute for clothing in feeds that target countries like France, Germany, or the UK, but not for other countries where CSSs can show. I'm not going to read out all the nitty-gritty details, but you can find all the information about feed specifications on our help center, which is listed here, support.google.com/merchants. It's also worth noting that the product's feed specification gets updated once per year, so it's a good idea to check in from time to time. Simply search for announcements in the help center I just mentioned. Once you have your feed ready, the final step when setting up a new merchant is to upload the feed in the Merchant Center account. There are two main ways to do this. The most common option when you're starting out is to upload the feed manually. Here, you'll take the file you've created with the offer attributes and values and upload it either from your computer or from a server. You also have the option to schedule regular feed fetches if you use a server, so you don't have to keep track of manually refreshing all your feeds. The second option is a bit more advanced and uses the Shopping Content API. This is most often relevant when managing large or complex Merchant Center accounts and requires a bit of API knowledge. However, if you're a CSS looking to advertise on behalf of a large number of merchants, this method is something we recommend. We've mentioned feed updates a couple of times already. Now let's look at that in some more detail. You should ideally update a feed as often as the merchant updates their details. Some merchants have changes in their inventory quite often, especially for prices and availability. To keep the feed information fresh, you should consider fetching the feed once per day. That way, you make sure that you limit items that are disapproved due to a mismatch between the feed information and the information on the landing page. In the previous slide, we mentioned the possibility of hosting the feed on a server as opposed to uploading it manually. This is something we consider best practice. By doing this, the feed can be automatically fetched every day, or weekly, or even monthly if you prefer. But do keep in mind that it must be updated at least once every 30th day. If not, the items will stop serving. Additionally, scheduling the feed updates would allow you to refresh the feed when the merchant's site traffic is low to limit disruption, like for example, in the middle of the night. If you find that you need to refresh items more often than once per day, we recommend looking into using the API, as the API will let you update in near real time. As we mentioned earlier, this is also the case if you manage many or large merchants. Now that we've covered the basic setup, let's look at how to keep your account healthy. For this section, we'll be covering the most common disapproval and suspension issues seen in Merchant Center. We'll go through what can lead to items being disapproved and accounts being suspended, and also where you can find information about these issues and resources on how to resolve them. Because great product data and smart campaign management is important, but your efforts are wasted if the feed or site violates the shopping policies. Broadly speaking, Merchant Center issues can be divided into two categories: issues that affect the quality of the data submitted through the feed, and issues which violate shopping policies. For data quality violations, meaning the data in the feed doesn't meet Google specifications, the top issues that we usually see are a mismatch of price or availability of a product between the feed and the landing page, wrong or missing shipping information, generic images or images that are too small, or missing GTINs, which we'll get back to at a later stage. For policy disapprovals, which results from not complying with shopping policies, the most common issues are insecure checkout, a missing refund policy, the destination URL, so the website being down, or generic landing pages, or no way for a user to complete an online purchase. A few of these we'll also address in greater detail in a very short time. Merchant Center has 3 levels of disapproval enforcement: account level, feed level, and item level. For items to be live and serving, both the account and the feed have to be approved, and the items should not have any issues. For all 3 of these levels, errors are shown with a red triangle. On an item level, this means that the item won't serve. And on an account level, they mean that the account as a whole is suspended. Warnings are shown with yellow triangles. These indicate that there are issues that may lead to suspensions or disapprovals if they're not resolved. Firstly, let's look into the more serious form of Merchant Center enforcement, which is the account suspensions. This means that the whole account will be offline, so this is the most severe kind of issue. Firstly, why do accounts get suspended? In order to ensure a safe and consistent user experience, Google has developed a set of policies that all merchants need to follow. If a shop is found to be non-compliant, you'll receive a warning alert with a set deadline to fix the root cause. If resolved on time, the warning will simply disappear. If it's not fixed, the account will get suspended until the merchant can prove that the issue has been resolved. No feeds will be able to run in the account as long as it's suspended. It's important to note that account suspensions happen on a per merchant basis. That means that for a CSS running accounts for multiple shops, it's the specific sub-account of a merchant that gets suspended, not your entire MCA. A policy violation from one of your shops should not cause any other shop to go offline. If an account has been suspended and the issue has been fixed, you can request a reinstatement through your account manager. Now let's take a look at the 5 most common suspension reasons. One of the most frequent issues we see is a lack of security on the merchant's website. To ensure a safe user experience, all websites should have SSL certificates on pages where users can add personal information, meaning it shows in the URL bar as we see here as HTTPS. Keep in mind that we consider emails to be personal information, so if there's a sign-up field for a newsletter, for example, this would also count. So it's often easiest to enable SSL for the entire website as a whole, just to make sure. We recommend that you check the merchant's website before even setting up their Merchant Center account, and ask them to fix the security issue if it's not SSL-secure. This is for the user's benefit after all, so it's something every merchant should do. Merchants should also be easy to reach in case their users need to get in touch. To ensure this, we require visible and easily identifiable contact information on the website. This means an email address, physical address, or a phone number. Now, 2 out of these 3 are required to be present, but we recommend having all 3, as it's better for the users. Merchants should also clearly show the returns and refund policy. Now, if I buy something off a website and I want to return it, I want to be able to find that information quickly and easily. And of course, it should be in the same language as the shopping ad that I first clicked. The policy should answer common questions, like, for example, what if I receive a broken product? Or what if I ordered something and I simply changed my mind? If I want to return an order, who pays for the return? Or how do I send my purchase back? Keep in mind that these are but a few examples and not a complete list. This point is quite straightforward, but sometimes merchants forget about it. As a user, what can I pay with? Before I get to the checkout, I want to know if I can pay with my MasterCard, or if the website only takes Visa. Or what about PayPal? A simple way to ensure users see this is to add the logos of accepted payment methods on a site header or footer, for example. It's pretty simple. Finally, the language should be the same from the shopping ad to checkout. Now, this might seem obvious, but some markets support several languages, like Sweden in this example, where both Swedish and English can be used. However, this doesn't mean that the merchant can mix and match. Either the whole purchase process should be in Swedish, or it should be in English. This also includes terms and conditions, returns policy, and so on. In short, all the necessary information. Now, we've talked a lot about account suspensions. Let's take a look at the most granular disapproval level in Merchant Center, which is disapprovals of individual items from your feed. Some of the most common reasons for disapprovals or suspensions include a mismatch for price or availability, or both, between the feed and the landing page. This is something to keep an eye out for, especially during sales or other busy periods, where merchant landing pages may change often. The landing pages should not be under construction or lead to a generic page. And finally, images should not be placeholder images or contain watermarks or promotional text. Now, keep in mind that this is not an exhaustive list by any means. It's just the 3 points that we've seen to be most common. If items have been disapproved, you can use the Merchant Center Diagnostics tab to see the current policy and data quality issues of your product data. This is the central place to find all things related to your feed health, as well as timelines of when to act to keep the feed alive. Here you can see an overview of your account health over the last month. That's the red and green bar there. And as mentioned in the previous section, the issues overview is divided into 3 parts. Account issues on the left here. So this would show the suspensions that we just went through. Feed issues in the center. And finally, you'll see item level issues on the right-hand side. Now, this is the same menu that we looked at in the previous slide, but here we've clicked on the rightmost menu for item issues. You can see that the overview tells you a few things. On the left, we see that item level suspensions are marked with the red triangles that we mentioned towards the beginning. Your warnings are shown with yellow triangles, and you also have product suggestions shown with blue circles. To the right of that, we'll see how many items of the feed were flagged by our checks, and then what percentage of your product inventory as a whole is at risk of disapproval. You'll also see how many of the clicks in the last 30 days were affected by any given issue. And finally, on the right-hand side, you'll have a link to relevant information on the given issue on our Help Center. Finally, this report can be downloaded through the arrow icon in the top right corner there. Now, there is a range of item issues, and as the list is quite extensive, we won't go through them all. But one particular issue we'd like to cover is GTINs, as this is something we frequently receive questions on from CSSs. GTINs are the barcodes, like UPCs, EANs, JANs, which are printed on the packaging and products of that your merchants sell. So your merchants should have this information. They uniquely distinguish products your merchants are selling, and it helps matching your offers with relevant search queries. GTINs are required for CSS shopping feeds targeting Czechia, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Switzerland, and the UK. For items that are new and has availability as either in stock or out of stock, you will have to submit the values for GTIN and brand. Items will otherwise get disapproved as the system is lacking sufficient product information. You can find out more about GTINs on our Help Center and in your Merchant Center Diagnostics tab, next to any offers disapproved with missing GTIN or invalid GTIN. So far, we've covered Merchant Center basics and a bit about feed health and common pitfalls. Now, lastly, we'll take a quick look at feed maintenance and how to keep your feeds up to date. We'll go through 3 points in this section: why feed maintenance matters, how you can ensure frequent updates to price and availability is put on autopilot, and lastly, we'll cover how you can map product data to Google's feed specifications. Firstly, why does feed maintenance matter? Now, there are a few good reasons to keep your feed up to scratch. Most importantly, it gives you as a CSS more opportunities to show your merchants products and ensure a consistent campaign performance. Secondly, as we'll see, you can automate price and availability updates. And lastly, the feed specifications are updated once per year, as we mentioned earlier, so it's good to keep on top of developments. One of the most common reasons for items not being able to serve is that the price or availability or both doesn't match between the feed and the landing page. As a CSS, you might not be able to update the feeds as often as the merchants update their info on their websites. So it's not surprising that some of you have told us that this is a challenge. One way to fix this is to use automatic item updates. In this case, you use a type of website code called microdata to send data straight to Merchant Center. Simply check if the merchant has microdata implemented. If they do, all you have to do on the Merchant Center side is to tick a box to enable the setting. The information is passed from the website straight to the Merchant Center, which means it overrides the feed information on price and availability. Do note, though, that this is a complementary tool. The feed data should still be kept up to date. Another important feature you can use to ensure products are up to date is feed rules. Feed rules will allow you to configure simple data transformation rules directly in Merchant Center. These rules are applied immediately after the feed upload, but before any diagnostics evaluation. Let's show an example. For new merchants, you can use feed rules to correct errors in attribute names and ensure column headers comply with official Google naming, like we saw in the feed example earlier on. Picture the following scenario. When you upload a merchant's feed, you see an error message of missing required attribute. You investigate this in more detail and notice that the feed column is called make instead of the required attribute name called brand. In this situation, you could go back to your merchant or feed provider and ask them to change it so it says brand instead of make, or you could simply set up a feed rule. Now, how do you set up this rule to map the missing feed attributes? To implement the feed rule, create new rule and select brand. Choose the option that says for brand, use this column in the feed, namely make. And once this rule is active, make will be mapped to brand by the system and the error message will disappear. To sum up, in today's video, we've covered the very fundamentals of feed health. How to ensure your feeds comply with Google policies and how to handle disapprovals. And how to maintain your feeds despite regular updates to prices, availability, and other attributes. These two steps will help set the right foundation for shopping performance. In our next video, we will take it one step further and show you how to optimize the feed content and make your shopping ads stand out. So stay tuned, and we hope to see you next time.